There have been talks lately about how much you need to play a game to be able to do a review on it. Recently, my brother and I had a talk about one that I found particularly bad on stream, and I was actually going to just post a clip of that, but listening to it back, I had concerns that it came across as too demanding and fanboy-y. So while I still want to put it out there, I wanted to give some extra context on what I think should be expected when you play a game. The clip in question. Reminds me, I think we talked about it a little bit when I was over on Sunday. But like the whole Battle Network thing where somebody did like a review of Battle Network and they're like, yeah, it's like the same game 6 times. You played one, you played them all. I'm like, that is incredibly... Like, I get that he didn't have time to review it, but like, how would you feel if somebody played through like, you know, a bunch of the Fire Emblem games and they're just like, listen, they're all the same.
No, they're...
Because, like, you know, like, I think from just, like, a very casual standpoint, you could understand that, right?
Yeah, because they're all the same games in the same series, so they're gonna resemble each other to some extent.
I think that is. But, you know, like, it's all, like, you know, like, you're just glancing at it and you're like, oh, it's turn-based, you know, like, it's a turn-based, grid-based game where there's, like, rock, paper, scissors with weapons. Sure, they're all the same, but it's one of those, like, yeah, but there's a lot of nuance when you actually play each one for more than 30 minutes.
Different mechanics, different casts, different stories.
So yeah, that kind of bothered me, just like, because I'm not saying you have to be an expert. Is this what I was doing? I was finding the animals?
Yep.
But like, you know, and Capcom really seems to want to push this too, so I feel kind of bad that, you know, there's somebody out here just like, it's the same game 6 times, and it's like, no it fucking isn't. You're a professional review thing. Like, if you couldn't get the review done in time, just say so. Don't force out, like, a very inaccurate thing where you're just like, yeah, they're all the same. They have the exact same tutorial and everything, and it's one of those, like, yeah, did you get to the point where you got double souls, you got style changes, you got beast out, you got the crosses.
That's Plains Blue now.
And if you say yes, tell me which game each of those was from, smartass. I don't know, it kinda cheesed me off.
Yeah.
And like, I also feel like they gave it to the guy, because it was The Escapist, right? Are you familiar with... I think I've talked about them before. And they just have like a crew of people that do different things, and sometimes they'll be like, here, do this 3-minute review, like whoever wants it. And like, the guy said about how he was like a fan of, you know, platformer Mega Man games, like the classic series and everything. And it feels like they just got a code and they're like, well, this is gonna be a big thing, so we should probably review it, right? Hey, you have played Mega Man before, why don't you review this? And it's one of those, like, they're completely different. There are people who like Mega Man platformers, and there are people who like Battle Network, and there are some people that like both, but that is like, you know, that is not a thing, you know? You can't just say, oh, if you love classic Mega Man, you'll love this. It's one of those, like, not necessarily. Like, I haven't been getting into them as much as, like, I just really need to hit it. I've been kind of busy, truth be told. Trying to get some stuff done. But, you know, it's one of those, like, I really like the Battle Network games, and I really like Star Force, but if it and X were hanging off a cliff and I could only save one...
It'd be Star Force.
Now, I should immediately follow this up by saying that I don't want anyone harassed over this. I don't think I have enough of a passionate following to worry about that, but at the same time, you never know. Now, in a vacuum, I didn't really like how that clip came off. It made me think too much of those zealots who try to discredit anyone from critiquing a game unless they have a 100% save file, and I also think it sounded a lot harsher than I intended with the bit about listing which games have style changes and which have double souls. That was more about me doubting that they had gotten far enough in any of those games to see those abilities, and as such, shouldn't be making reviews with broad generalizations that could turn people off to the games in question. So how much of a game do I think someone should play before they crank out a review? While I'm not one of those crazies that think you need a platinum trophy to truly understand a game, I do think that ideally you should get to the credits on the standard difficulty. I think that's pretty straightforward. It gets you through the bulk of the content on offer in a way that most people picking it up casually will use. Of course, The operative word here is ideally, and this doesn't always work. I mean, you have fighting games with arcade modes that you can clear in under 30 minutes that aren't even the main focus, and stuff like Animal Crossing where you just kind of play however long you want. In those cases, I'd say whenever it feels like you've gotten the gist of things down, you can go ahead, though this is going to be pretty open to interpretation. And the nuance doesn't end there. There are 3 scenarios where I can see clocking out early not just being acceptable, but maybe even adding something to a review. The first shouldn't be too contentious. If the game's too buggy or just plain unfinished, it's perfectly understandable that you're not able to get through it and serves as a warning for anyone else thinking of giving it a try. Likewise, if a game is just too hard for you to clear, while you might not be able to give it the most thorough of reviews, it does let people know that the title might just be a bit beyond your average skill level. While I'm sure most people will push back on this and say that if you can't even beat a game, you have no business talking about it, I don't think you have to defeat the devil to get a general feel for Cuphead to comment on it. Leave your obligatory game journalist jokes in the comments, and yeah, despite what I just said, I do think you should at least be able to clear the tutorial. And the last qualifier is just whether you're having any fun. While I've been known to push through with some real turds, and if you get paid to do reviews, I imagine you have more incentive than just personal pride, I do think there is some value in just admitting that you quit something because it's not worth playing. Of course, you do have to take biases into account, though that's a risk with even regular reviews. Can't tell you how many times I've seen someone bash a Dynasty Warriors game when the person holds the whole hack and slash genre in contempt. I wouldn't rate Halo because I don't do first-person shooters and my opinion would be worthless, so why the heck should anyone listen to what you think about Age of Calamity, you palooka? Either way, since personal preference plays a pretty big part in this last one, I could see a lot of people discounting it and I wouldn't even be mad. With my general criteria laid out, why not give examples of each before summing everything up? I played Deadpool a while back, specifically for the PS3, and I could not beat it. Early on, something broke and I couldn't complete a level. This gave me some misgivings, but a quick restart and I was able to move on. Then, once I was a good bit further in the game, it happened again, and retrying the stage led to a repeat. I'd been playing for a while though, and the console's fan was going crazy, so I powered down, waited over an hour, then gave it another go, only for another crash in the exact same spot, and I decided I was done. I hadn't seen anybody else having this issue, so maybe it was an anomaly, maybe it was the console, maybe it was the disc, maybe I just did something really specific to create a glitch that would soft lock me. But I felt pretty justified talking about what I liked with the game, what I didn't, and capping it all off by saying that, for me at least, the game was literally unbeatable, no matter how much I practiced. If someone told me they had no issues with the game, or if I just played such and such a version of it, I'd have been fine, I'd believe them, but hey, I played the PS3 version, so I was gonna review the PS3 version. The one that got me for difficulty was Sonic Chronicles. I have no way of capturing DS gameplay, so just enjoy footage of the much better Mania for the time being. Anyway, in Chronicles, it's a speed-based character in a turn-based RPG, completely controlled by the DS's touchscreen, with obtuse menus and a story so bad that a hack writer from the comic sued for copyright infringement. Aside from all that, it was also really hard, or at least had no sense of what a difficulty curve was. A few chapters in, I was struggling against a few buffed up enemies that served as the area's bosses, then beat down major story characters that were supposedly the strongest guys ever with no issue, then went back to regular stage enemies one-shotting members of my party. I thought about compensating by grinding up some levels, but knew that even with that, I would still continue to fail at the awful touch controls that I was expected to execute perfectly for the character's special moves. Skill issue? Maybe. But even if I did quit only halfway through the story, I didn't need the other half to be able to tell that it was absolutely not worth playing. And for no fun, I'll talk about a game I never even did an informal review on, Star Fox Zero. Touted as a return to form, I was really looking forward to it, and never have I regretted a game purchase more. It had a camera system designed for some sort of alien people with an extra set of eyes in their nipples, the gamepad showing the view from the cockpit, and the TV showing a wider, third-person view. It was super awkward and unpleasant to use, and took me a while to just kinda get it. Proponents of the title said it wasn't bad. It only took around 3 to 5 hours to get used to, which is also about how long it took to beat the game. Not only that, but gameplay itself wasn't even very fun. it being a not as good knockoff of 64, while also aping several elements of 2, which had been buried for years, released afterwards almost like an apology. Not that I cared, since the series was dead to me by that point. My brother actually quit the game during the mission where you very slowly float around in a helicopter-like hovercraft to release a tiny, Rob-like drone to have it hack into some monitors, also very slowly. Not me though, I took it all the way to the end, baby, against the crap final boss, where I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be looking at the TV or the gamepad, despite finally kind of getting used to the controls a single mission earlier. I banged my head against that fight over and over again, finally getting Andros just one hit away, and in a game where you always have to hit the big, dumb, flashing, obvious weak point, they put the damn thing on his back, and when I didn't figure it out quickly enough, he got back up and wiped me. Had the game been fun and the sort that I'd want to do multiple runs of, like Star Fox 64, I would have laughed it off, thought of it as part of the learning curve, and got right back on it. Instead, after stubbornly soldiering through all the crap the game had thrown my way, rewriting the way my brain functioned to contend with the control scheme and cameras, having 2 friends sit through everything with me, sympathizing and giving me encouragement, I did what I should have done a half hour in and just rage quit. The game is trash, mediocre compared to the previous entries, and further drugged down by the shoehorning in of dumb hardware gimmicks, and it's not even the first in the series to do it. Call me crazy, but if I had been doing reviews back then, I don't think landing one more hit and then reading a list of the people responsible would have added anything to my opinion. On the contrary, I think quitting that close to the finish line speaks volumes. So there you go, some examples. Did any of them sound unfair? Although it did feel a little like cheating, choosing Sonic Chronicles, a deeply flawed game, for the hard category instead of something that was honestly too much for me, like Dawn of the Monsters or Mega Man and Bass. I'll knuckle down and beat that last one someday, even if something dies in me doing so. To summarize, if a game doesn't have a standard endpoint, I think you can review it as long as you get the general sense of things, and I think it'd also be a good idea to include your general range of experience in your summation to give people an idea of where you're coming from. And if it does have an endgame, you should either get to those end credits or at least go into it with the intention of doing so. If something prevents this, be it glitches, difficulty, or just being plain unenjoyable, I think that's fine as long as you're upfront about it. I've heard people give level-headed takes on difficult games, talking about what it does well while bemoaning a particularly hard section where their run ended, or even just highlighting when a game crosses from challenging to just plain unfair. There are a few people who don't care for the jump jump slide slide, and I really hated the Egg Viper in Sonic Adventure DX. Bugs are bugs, nothing you can really do about that but wait for patches, and if they thought it was good enough to sell, it should be good enough to critique. When it comes to a game not being fun though, that's when it can be a bit tricky to tell what's objective and what's bias, and with all reviews being made of opinions anyway, you could argue that none of them are objective, just some are more universally shared. I think you can kinda get around that by stating your gripes clearly. I'm not a fan of most fighting games, so I tend not to talk about them, but if I did and complained about needing to memorize 20 button combos with directional inputs and getting stun locked by a computer set to normal, I think most people could take away from it that it might not be a bad game, just not very beginner friendly, and veterans would see me for the weakling I am. So, to circle back around, did the review of the Battle Network Legacy Collection meet my standards? Well, no. While this whole video probably sounds like a call-out, it was originally just the short conversation I had with my brother that got me thinking about how much of a game you need to play for you to be able to give a fair opinion, and that I didn't think it was what inspired this whole little rant. While I couldn't tell you how long they played any of the games, I would bet a good deal of money that it was for less than 2 hours, probably less than 1 for any single title, and I do not gamble. All the footage shown was of early game, none of the gameplay changes that give each a unique identity, and showed a complete lack of understanding for the mechanics. Not only that, but it mentioned several things that were just plain wrong, such as there being no way to cut down on random encounters, despite every title other than one having tools to do just that. Mentioning how much they played the game, or just labeling it a first impression, would have done a lot to make it more palatable. They did mention that they had never played this series of games, but had the last 2 collections of the platformers, which helped distance them a bit from being an authority, but later in the video they said, and I quote, "And frankly, if you played one Battle Network title, you played them all," end quote. which is a pretty definitive thing to say. To a degree, I can understand. This wasn't a review of a game, it was a whole series, and even if you just played 6 of them, a version of each, it'd take well over 100 hours to get through. That's even more than a Persona 5. Not sure when they got their code for the collection, but unless it was a few weeks beforehand, I would not expect anyone to be able to get through that without at least that much time, and that can't be the only title they need to get through for their work. But at the same time, they could have also just not. Sure, I know it's topical and good for the algorithm, but if I had done the same for Pokemon Violet when it came out, only playing an hour or two, I would have told you how slow-paced it was, how choppy the animations were, and how annoying some of the characters were. But after giving it enough of a chance and getting into the nitty-gritty, it wound up being one of my favorite in the series. If you rush out a review, you do a disservice to it, your viewers, and yourself, since it really hurts your credibility, cause I'll tell you what, I was not the only one unhappy in those comments. The Battle Network games are by no means perfect, especially 1 and 4, there's plenty to criticize, but with Capcom actually acknowledging our existence again, it would be swell if the collection at least got a fair shake. But hey, what do you think? Am I being too much of a defensive fanboy? Are my rules for reviews fair, too generous, or still pretty restrictive? At the very least, I've stated the standards that I try to hold myself to, so if I slip up, you can call me a hypocrite and publicly shame me. With that said, I'm Wes, the Explosion, who forgot to introduce myself at the top of this video, and thanks for watching. Maybe consider subscribing if you like Mega Man content. For everlasting peace.